Hello students and welcome to our class, SOC241. My name is Professor Justine Hecht. This is Race and Ethnicity. It's great to be here with you all today as per usual. Okay, so we are now at week 14. We've really only got one more official week of content and then your final projects are due, so that's very exciting. You're almost done. And we've covered so much. We've covered theories of race and sociology. We've covered the experiences of various racial groups, both within the United States and globally. And now we're kind of moving into this space of starting to think through, okay, we've learned all of this information about racialization, how groups are racialized differently, and how this serves a different purpose for the ordering of our society, right? And so now we want to start thinking more closely about some of the institutions that actually contribute to and shape these racial categories, right? Because remember, one of the things that we've learned about is that race does not have a basis in biology. Oh my gosh, I can't speak today. My apologies. Race does not have a reality that is biological. Race itself is something that's socially constructed. So for example, I'm Italian and Irish. In the summertime, I get pretty dark. And as we've learned, right, Italians and Irish people were not seen as white when they first came to the United States. We learned, of course, that that was the result of their class status, right? Because their class status as poor Europeans would have revealed the mythology of white supremacy, right? If white supremacy argues that white people are naturally superior, biologically superior because our brains are bigger, which we know is not true, but that's what was argued, right? Then therefore, there shouldn't be poor white people because they should be able to use their natural and biological superiority to overcome any kind of issues of poverty or anything like this, right? This is where the term white trash comes from as well. This idea that poor whites are somehow betraying the reality of the biological reality of whiteness, right? And so what that means then, right, is that sure, my DNA is going to dictate, you know, how dark I am or how light I am. But that is a neutral statement, right? That's just a completely neutral statement. You will be, you know, the summertime I'm pretty pale or pretty dark, and the wintertime I'm pretty pale, right? That just has to do with the melanin in my skin and the way my skin responds to the sun, right? That doesn't mean anything about me as a good or a bad person or anything like this, right? And so when we're talking about the social construction of race, we're talking about the social meanings that get applied to skin color, right? And those social meanings then are what create the experiences of racism, of privilege, of intersectionality, so on and so forth, right? And so what we're going to be doing this week is looking at the ways in which prisons contribute to those stereotypes, contribute to forming those racial meanings, contribute to racial formation. Right? And so that's what you'll see. This week I do want to point out that I want you to answer all of these questions. That's because we're doing a deep dive into an institution now, right? We've got all this background information. Now we're doing a deep dive into this institution, okay? And so the first question is asking you about what I just explained. How does the prison system reproduce racialization? What messages does the prison send about the meanings that are applied to race? And so I want you to use a concrete example, either from the documentary, The 13th, or from the Drapetomania Collector reports to help you support your discussion. I'm going to talk about both of those more in just a second here. The second question is, what is prison abolition? Is it difficult to imagine a society without prisons? Why are we not? And use at least one concrete example from Dr. Davis's book, Are Prisons Obsolete, to help you support your answers. So this going to be important to read this. She's going to explain what prison abolition is, right? So you need to know what prison abolition is to help us think through if it's difficult to imagine a society without prisons and some days it's like that, y'all. Is it difficult to imagine a society without prisons and why not? Okay. The third one then asks you to go into the Drapetomania Collector reports and identify, work with at least one of the 4 patterns that they've identified. So they identify trauma, discrimination, exploitation, and state violence as patterns that show up in Arizona's incarceration system. So select one of those, describe what it is, and then discuss how that helps us understand how discrimination and racism are systemic. right? You'll need at least one concrete example from the reports. And I'm going to show you all of that in just a second here. So those are the questions that you're answering for this week. And again, this is a deep dive. We're taking everything that you've learned so far and now applying it to a concrete example. Okay, so the first thing for you, your resources this week, you have Dr. Davis's book, Are Prisons Obsolete?, published by 7 Stories Press. I'd like for you to please read the first chapter, Introduction, Prison Reform and Prison Abolition. It's not very long. Dr. Davis, I think we've probably read a couple of her things maybe at this point, or maybe heard her speak at least. She's very accessible. It's very easy to read. Her writing is fantastic. If you can try to write like Dr. Davis, you're going to be in good shape, right? But here she's going to talk about the difference between prison reform and prison abolition, which is going to help you answer that second question. And then the Drapetomania collective reports. So let me just go ahead and show you. Now you're going to have the same thing written out here for you as well. So I'll just go ahead and open the reports. This is going to go to your home page. Now the Drapetomania collective was a group of incarcerated women and professors at Arizona State University who work together to do research into what is happening at Arizona's prisons. Now, specifically, the women were incarcerated at Perryville Prison, which is just out, a few miles down the road from Estrella Mountain Community College. They wanted to understand how did the experiences of women on the outside of the prison inform how they ended up in prison? What are their experiences while they're there? And then what happens upon release if in fact people will be released, right? And how does this contribute to the growth of mass incarceration, the growth of the number of people in prison, the surveillance state, so on and so forth, right? And so these reports came out a couple of years ago, and so you're going to have a couple of options. The first thing you're going to want to do is go to read the reports right here. So click that. And then you're going to want to read the executive summary. You have the option to read it online or to download it as a PDF. So if you read it online, it's just a regular website for you. You can see kind of the sense how long it is. Right here are the 4 patterns that I'm talking about, and so they are defined there for you. These are the 4 areas that they explore with the in-depth reports. So this executive summary is like the key takeaways from the in-depth reports that they did. You may be able to find enough information on this page to help you respond to that third question. If you find that you are struggling and need more information, then go back here and read, kind of get a sense of some of these, right? And depending on the example you're using from the executive summary, that's probably going to help inform which of these you should look at, but they're also not like super, super long, right? This one's maybe a little bit longer, but they're well organized based on, the specific issue that they're talking about in that case. So you can just kind of skim through them until you find something that seems to help you talk about how racism and discrimination are systemic, okay? And so just to give you a little heads up, this part 1, the web of criminalization, this is looking at how, this one is probably going to be very helpful, is looking at how the structures within communities or the lack of structures within communities creates the possibility for incarceration in the first place. Okay, so what are the structures, the social ideas, the economic issues, the political issues, right, that inform who gets incarcerated, how they get incarcerated, and what the long-term outcome is that, okay? This is going to look at, part 2 then looks at the sentencing process, right? And how in Arizona, this is broad and it'll be explained more in detail here, but in Arizona, there used to be a process for ensuring that people could be released early from prison for good behavior, parole, all these kind of different things, and that has gone away or has not been utilized. And so this is looking at how extreme case the sentencing, like heavy charges, right? And the abolition of early release also contributes to mass incarceration. These are the experiences of people inside Perryville, and this is the post-release life tale, right? And so how, even when you're released, the experience of having been in prison marks you and continue. This one might be really useful for that question as well, actually. marks you, and you have to continue to navigate it throughout the rest of your life, really. Okay, so I think that is pretty much that. What you should know about these reports is that they are very unique. They're unique in that research by incarcerated women that produces this kind of level of rigor and detailed information has not really been done before. And so this is something that's new. This is something that allows us to really understand prisons from a different perspective, and really from the perspective of those who are most impacted by this institution of the prison. You should know that in order to do this, folks interviewed a large number of incarcerated women. I want to say over 30 or 40. It might be even more than that. I can't remember quite off the top of my head. And so this was done through doing hours of research, hours of having conversations with women that were incarcerated in Perryville. So it's a very rigorous and detailed report for you. So I hope it is helpful. Is that all I want to say? I think that's all I want to say. Oh, the other thing that I would point out is that this video is from Module 3. You might recognize it, but to help you answer that first question, I would suggest go ahead and just watch this video again. It's only it's only 5 minutes long, so you can remind yourself of what racialization and racial formation theory are. And then, of course, you'll be watching the Netflix documentary, The 13th. This is on it's on Netflix, but it's also on YouTube, and you can watch it for free on YouTube. You can watch it straight from here, of course, right? And so we did discuss The 13th back in the module on African American experiences within the United States. And so we talked about the ways Dr. Michelle Alexander's argument that prisons work to recreate Jim Crow, right? And so Jim Crow segregation, and that the processes of the prison essentially work to deny Black people the right to vote, right? Undoing the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, right? And work to continue to segregate different communities, right? So this documentary is almost 2 hours long. Watch it with your friends. It's a great documentary. I highly recommend it, of course, since I'm showing it. But yeah, you can make a whole viewing party out of it. You don't have to do, all by yourself necessarily. So just make sure that you're planning time to be able to watch the film and then to also read this information up here. Okay. All right. I hope that is helpful. Reach out if you need anything, and otherwise I'll talk to you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.